And welcome back to our Singular.live streaming series. And we're going to start by introducing our two rock stars. We've got, I called you Sunshine Suzanne out of the UK in beautiful Amersham.
A little bit grey, not sunshiny
Looks
today.
like, I said earlier, that looks like sunshine shining in on you. They're always complaining about the weather. Looks like Southern California weather to me.
I mean, I'm British. If I'm not complaining about the weather, what am I complaining about?
Exactly. And then we have Catherine with no sunshine, but maybe there is sunshine.
It's a little gray.
Well, we have it's a little June gloom here in LA.
Yeah.
And we've got Travis, who I told Travis earlier. I said, "Well, there he is."
There I am. I never see the light of day. I sit here 24.
No, you're buried in deep in the Singular studio, in the big studio. I'm in the little room around the corner from Travis, and Travis is going to keep us honest and do all the cutting and editing and make sure we can cut sources and whatnot. So again, just a quick reminder, the sort of landscape that the pieces we're using Travis, keep me honest, we're using vMix today.
I got vMix and I got Zoom call just on the next monitor over, and basically just capturing a video, desktop capture, splicing it up.
Yeah, pretty straight. It's the same setup as last time, pretty straightforward. A Zoom box, and Travis is switching the sources in vMix. vMix, again, a great tool. We use them quite extensively, as we do with others. So many of our other integrators. But let's dive in. Where are we going to start? We're going to pick up where we left off last time, where we went into the marketplace. We downloaded a theme. We got it into Singular Studio. And for today's exercise, we're going to show you what happens when you're in Studio and you need to change some things that are not available to you inside the template that you've downloaded. So we're going to get to that point. I'm going to pass it over to Catherine. We're going to pass it over to Suzanne. She's going to add some pieces. I'll take it back, and then we'll do some editing inside of, or I should say, adding some data into the template inside of Studio. So let me share my screen first. Boom. 1 second. Bang, there we go. So everyone can see Studio here. And this is basically where we left off last time. We're going to zero in on this lower topic 2-line plus title. Kind of a mouthful, but you get the idea. Here it is in preview. Again, just a quick overview of Studio. I click on any item in the list and I see it in preview. And this is the one we're going to zero in on. And you can see down here, those are our fill-in forms that were created when the composition was built. Now, in the last tutorial, we did not have you building compositions. I think we touched on it briefly, and that's the purpose of today's demo, is to swim upstream from this Studio Control app and show you the Composer, where we can add some different variables. The three ones that we want to focus on today are adding an image, because there's no image in here. I think I was talking to Suzanne earlier. We're going to add an image somewhere up here. And then we're going to change, I believe, color. And Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong. What was the third one again? I already lost my train.
Yeah, the second one is actually animation style.
Yes, thank you.
There. And then
so
third one, the sizing.
Sizing, okay. Mm-hmm. I apologize there. I couldn't. So basically what we're talking about on the animation style, when I take this into program, you see the animation style. We're going to do some changes on that. And what's going to end up happening, the end result of this is going to be that down here in the fill-in forms, right now we just have 3 of them. So for example, if I type in Stephen, as you know, you'll see it in preview. And if I update it, you're going to see it in program. So we're going to add some new pieces to this puzzle. Let's go back, let's take this back to header, update. And I think the best point now is for me to pass it off to, I'm going to stop screen sharing. And now, Catherine, you're going to pick up at this point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so we're back in the dashboard here. And if you guys remember from our last live stream, when you download a theme, you're going to download a composition. And what we did last time was we opened it with Studio. So that's where Stephen was just in. But for now, we're going to dig into the composition itself and change some core components of it. So if I double click on clear, give it some time to load.
There you go. Yeah, there's quite a few overlays in this composition, but
yeah,
so it takes a second.
Yeah, and some of them have more than others. It just sort of depends on what you download. So so now we're in Composer, this sort of overlay editing building environment, if you will, and there's 5 key components of the interface that I'm going to run through before handing it over to Suzanne so she can show you guys how to tweak the lower third components that over here, this lower third specifically. All right, so the first panel on the left is called the composition tree. And this is where all of the overlay elements live. So something that's important to know is that each overlay is inside of something called a subcomposition, which is indicated by this cube icon here. So you can think of a subcomposition as the master container for each overlay and the components that make up that overlay, like rectangle widgets, text widgets, and so forth. So let's dig into our lower third here. And we can see that if I expand all of these groups out by hitting this plus button, you can see that there's a variety of things in here. A couple of, well, 3 text widgets and a handful of rectangle widgets. So let's go back to the root of the tree. And you can see that there's around 15 or so subcompositions in here because there's that same amount of overlays in the theme. Right now, we've only got 4 displayed in our output window. So to the right of this composition tree over here, in this section is called the property panel. And this panel is where you can adjust the properties of your overlay elements like position, size, color, animation style, and a bunch of other stuff. So that's pretty straightforward. Down here in the bottom right of Composer is called the Data Interface and Control Panel. It's one of the most important things in this panel is called control nodes. You see it labeled here in this tab. Control nodes are created and displayed here, and they allow your operators to customize the overlay content within Studio. So as you can see back in this lower third, if I hit this arrow button, you can see that there's these 3 editable fields inside of this specific overlay. So there's essentially 3 control nodes that have been created that allow your operator to change the header text, which is what Stephen was doing before, the title text, the main text, and the subtitle. So you can see that information update. Now, if I jump over to Studio, where Stephen was at, give it a second to load. And I click on this lower third, you can see that these same editable fields are here. So I can change what I want to change. Rid of that. And update it. So it's pretty straightforward. In Composer, you're sort of deciding what your overlay, what your operators are going to be able to manipulate during a live show or when they're prepping for the live show.
Catherine, do me a favor, jump back over to the dashboard for a second. This might be a good place to sort of zero in. So as you can see in the dashboard, this little green icon here, that denotes that someone has the composition open. Now we're in a tutorial account, so that's why it said singular. If we were in a sort of a standard account, if you will, you're gonna see the user's name, so you can see who has it open. So by design, you can't have the composition open in multiple places at the same time. But as you noticed earlier, when Catherine opened up the control application studio, she was able to open it, and I have it open too. So you can have the applications open in multiple locations at the same time, but the compositions you cannot. And you'll get a prompt if you try to open that composition that says somebody else has it open. Do you want to kick them out? And that's really just for, oh gosh, I guess just keep our wits about us, because it's getting very complicated if multiple people are editing the composition at the same time, which is That's why that's there. So if you see this thing turning on and off, it'll disappear if Catherine closes the composition, which actually she'll do in a minute when Suzanne takes over and opens it.
Yep.
You know,
Okay, cool. So let's jump back over to Composer. I'm going to go back to the root of our composition tree. So we were over here in the data interface and control panel. There's also these things called data nodes in here, which are used to funnel live data into your overlays. We don't have any specifically in this theme. There's an option to save out some save points called revisions, and there's a couple of other things. I think Suzanne is going to touch on revisions when she's making some tweaks to this lower third. Okay, so that's the data interface and control panel. The fourth main panel in Composer up here to the right is the preview window. This is pretty straightforward. It's where you can see all of your overlay elements. Like I said before, we've got 4 on screen right now. This one, I think the panel, upper left, and then upper right social. Okay, so there's one last key component of Composer, and it's called the Composition Navigator. This tool can be opened up in the composition tree over here by selecting this specific button. And Suzanne mentioned this before we went live, that sometimes people sort of miss this because it's a little bit hidden. So just make note of it. It's going to be really important. So you can open it by clicking it or by hitting Command or Control F. So you can see that this navigator is kind of an elaboration on what is shown in the composition tree over here. There's a few additions in here, but one of the main things is the ability to take your overlays in and out. So you can see on the right side, there's a bunch of buttons, in and out buttons here. So right now, like I mentioned previously, we've got 4 overlays on screen. I'm going to take all of them out except for the lower third right here that we want to change. So if I scroll down, I can see this upper left 2 line is in, so I'm going to take it out. And what you can see happening here, take it back in for a second, is a specific animation style that you can define as an artist. There's a lot of things in Composer that you can do. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to take out the upper right social, the panel left image and text, and we're left here with this lower topic 2 line and title. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne, and she's going to teach you guys some of the basics of building in Composer by focusing in on this lower third. So what Stephen mentioned before is that you can only have 1 artist in there at a time because you don't want to override someone else's work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and close out so Suzanne can open it up.
Yeah, go ahead and close out and then jump. And then Suzanne, when you come back in, go start at the dashboard. And you can see there where that green icon is no longer visible because no one has the composition open. And just to, Suzanne will dive in, that just a brief word on that Composition Navigator. That's your go-to best friend. I mean, that's how you can really bring in different overlays, see if they're interacting with each other, they're not overlapping each other and whatnot. That floating panel is really the best way to navigate, especially in a composition like this. After you've downloaded a composition that has a lot of overlays, I think there must be at least 15, maybe 20 overlays in this composition. So that navigator is the best way to jump around and get your bearings on what is in the composition as a whole, meaning bringing them in and bringing them out, and quite powerful tool. I think there's a shortcut too on a command. There is a shortcut. The Command F on the Mac and Control F on the PC is how you bring that up and down. And Suzanne, having built many, many compositions, will tell you that is a very handy little tool.
It's your best friend.
It is your best friend.
So I'm going to start by resizing my areas a little bit just so I can see everything a little bit better. I have zoomed in my screen, so things might get cut off or look a little bit funny, but that is purely based on the fact I have zoomed in my screen. But first of all, before we start anything, I'm going to get into my revisions and I'm going to make a backup, because the last thing I want to do is go halfway down the line and go, oh no, I've completely messed this up. I don't need this anymore. And the date today is the 2nd.
What this is going to allow you to do is to roll back to your default. Like before you do anything, you make a revision snapshot so that if you say, like Suzanne said, if you say, oh, I want to go back to my original state, I can just simply hit the restore button and boom, you're back to where you were before. Very, very powerful feature. Just a small reminder, and then I'll send it back to Suzanne. Singular is always saving constantly, right? It's a complete web cloud-based system. It is constantly saving all the time. So, but at any one given point in time, you can make a snapshot, a save, if you will, and restore that state that the overlay or the composition was in. So very important.
Yeah, you can only undo so far before your finger falls off.
You can't undo at all if you refresh.
Oh, so true. That too.
It's always one I get. I was like, I've refreshed my screen. Why can't I undo the stuff I've made? It's like, it's gone now, but there's no history of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to our nice long title of low topic 2-line plus title. I'm then going to right click and I'm gonna duplicate this.
So we're keeping the original one, and she's going to do
a before and after.
Yes.
Yes. Because I'm lazy, I'm just going to go to the beginning and just write new lower third, and I'm also going to, make it a bit shorter so it makes it easier for Catherine and Stephen to find it later on. So I have double clicked on the name to be able to edit this, and then I'm just going to press enter to save that down. So again, I've just double clicked on the name, and that allows me to change it. Once I'm happy with my name, I can then just press arrow and I can jump in to the composition. But before I'm going to do that, I'm going to press Command F, bring up my Composition Navigator. And I'm going to make sure that the one I've just duplicated is in the out position rather than in, because I'm going to start making changes and I'm going to see what's underneath. And I don't want to do that because it could get confusing after a while. So I'm then going to press Command F again and close that. Now just above our preview panel, we have a great little thing that I like to put on, which is the bounding box. Now you probably won't see this because it's incredibly faint. So what I'm going to do just to emphasize what's going on is I'm just going to turn everything off. And so my first box here has text in it. Then I've got my base. And I've got my animation, which if you can see, it's these very thin lines in the drawing on. And then I've got my header text and then my header base. Now, before we start anything, I'm going to mention that everything is done in percentages. Now, the percentage of the group is relative to the canvas size that we're working in. So if I had my group set to 100, everything inside that would then be referencing to that canvas size. But as you can see, my groups have been scaled down to 35 and 5 on the X and Y. And that's basically allows me to make sure that everything inside of this is set to 100. Now the math on that makes it really easy when you start building everything. Because if I want to start expanding the base, all I have to do is start typing in numbers and everything inside that will grow dynamically rather than me having to go through every single element going, okay, right, well, this is now 40, this is now 50. I can now just type in one single number.
No, that's a good point, Suzanne, in the sense that you only want to be scaling in one spot, not at the group level and then in each individual widget where you can do that, because otherwise it gets very difficult to figure out where things are scaled. And you can see how Suzanne has the anchor point left. That's why it's expanding to as it is down. The anchor point is left bottom. I can see the bounding box real nice. It actually shows up pretty good on my screen.
Oh, that's good. I was worried you wouldn't be able to see it.
It's nice.
It's a light blue. You can't actually see it.
Yeah, if you can't see it, I'm just going to turn everything off. There you go. You can actually let me trigger out the background. Hopefully you can see it against the.
Oh yeah, you can see it there.
Yeah, actually it's helpful if you take the background out because then we don't see the checkerboard.
Yeah, and the background is just something that we default add to all of our themes because sometimes if you're building like a black overlay, you're not going to see it with that background. So you need some sort of contrast behind it, but you can just take that out if you prefer working on a black background.
So a really smart way of working is I'm gonna just extend everything to, so it's all the same width as what I've got. So a really smart way of doing it is I'm actually just gonna come up to my main where I know it's the right length, and then just gonna control copy, and I'm gonna paste that into my size X, and it jumps really quickly. And then I'm just gonna double this because we're gonna add our image to this, and I've just made that slightly bigger on the Y. Now, again, as Stephen mentioned, I've got my my anchor point set to this bottom left. Now, if I had it to the top and I then put that back down to 5, you can see that it will start dynamically changing that way. All right, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing to my header text. So I'm just going to make sure that my anchor point is at this bottom left, or actually I could even have it to the bottom here, but having it at the bottom left makes most sense because I'm also changing the height as well as the width.
Nice.
See, in a couple of clicks, I've transformed the graphic already, and I've not even got to the hard parts. So as we've probably not mentioned widgets fully yet, but any widget, so anything here like the text, rectangles, they're all what we call widgets. And everything that you're going to use probably more often than not are at the top, just above our Composition Navigator. So you've got text, you've got circle, rectangle, and image, and then I think this is either YouTube or a video. I'm never too sure.
I think it's just a video.
That actually, just a little side note, we might move that down the road, but those are, yeah, like Suzanne said, those are commonly used widgets, specifically for text, circle, rectangle, image, and then they are also located in the library under add, as you know. So yeah. Widget.
The whole widget thing, but we'll cover that in more detail probably at a later date.
Everybody.
So I'm going to click add. And then again, I'm gonna, as default, everything's set to 0 and 100 on this particular one. So I'm gonna, first of all, I'm gonna unlink this guy, and I'm gonna use my mouse, and I'm just gonna drag it like you would do in any Adobe product, and I can scroll it that way. I can then also type in 5.5, or I can use my little arrows like so. So once I've done that, I can then shift it to where I want it to go. And again, a really good way is using my anchor points. I can change that location, and I can press 0 because I know I want it to be on this left-hand side. I don't want it to be quite as close to that, so I'm just going to put in a 2 bar, a 2% breather. And then just out of default, I always go 90 to 95 on my height. And then I know now I need to change my position of my header text.
And I know why you do that 90 to 95, because you don't want the image to really butt up against the edge of the rectangle, which makes sense.
Because
what is that
my header
for that? It's like oh, I don't know. You guys will know. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Suzanne.
So again, having the bounding box on means that when I know how big everything is, because right now I don't have an image in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my interface panel. I'm going to select image, and I'm going to write social image. Hopefully I'll get the spelling right this time.
Nice.
Last time I got it wrong. So what happens when you type quickly?
You can always rename it though, so.
This is very true.
Yep.
Just by clicking at the hamburger or the, I don't know, little control switchy button, I can change it so it just says image. And then I can just update that. So I'm just going to play it safe and leave it at image. Then heading over to this middle panel where we've got all our transform options, I'm going to head over to where it says image. And then anything that's got this underlined dots means that I can connect it to a control node. Now, clicking that, I get this new menu. I'm just going to come select this, and here is my image.
And as soon
Now
as
I
you
can see
select
my
that, we put that default image in there for you so that you can see, you know, what it's going on. You know what, Suzanne? I might, if you don't mind, I might challenge you to show users the other way to do what you just did, which is to click on the image and have it create the control node for you.
All right, I'm going to press on link. This is how we disconnect control nodes.
Yep.
And then I'm just going to re-click it.
Now delete your control node just so you can show there's two ways to skin the cat, so to speak. Boom, gone. No more control node.
And then because I haven't renamed it, so if I rename this something like image social, and then I click that, this field here is always going to inherit the name of what it's called. So I don't obviously want to call it that. So I'm just going to rename it to image. And boom, there goes the dynamite.
And just so you know, the reason we have those two methods of doing it, sometimes you have a quite large composition where you need to create a lot of control nodes, and you might want to be down in the control node area in the lower right hand and create all your control nodes and then connect them. So it's sort of depending on what type of composition you're building, but yeah.
I think what's also useful to mention here is that when a widget is connected to a control node, it's going to turn green. So if you click out of that for a second, that little pop-up menu, I don't know if you guys can see this, but the image text there has actually turned green. So that's sort of an easy way for you to know if it's connected to a control node or if it's not. Oftentimes, if you're in Studio and you've built something maybe from scratch and you're like, okay, I don't know why I don't have a control field, an editable field for my text, go back into Composer, make sure it's green. If it's not connected. So it's just a nice sense check for you.
And then if like this, if I go to the text one, if it doesn't have a dotted line underneath it, it means that we cannot link to it. So font is one of the ones that we can't link to. But just so you know that not everything is linked, you can link to. All right. So now that we've added in our little image and we've created our control node, I'm happy with the positioning that everything's in. I'm going to head over to my animation. Now, I don't like the animation that I've got here, so I'm just going to find my little hamburger sliders and I'm just going to change everything to none, and I'm going to start again from scratch.
Just a small note, whenever you bring in a widget into the composition, into the subcomposition, by default, we add a fade on both the in and the out. So that's why it was, and then Suzanne's just clearing all of those. Well, there was other types of animations in there, but that's kind of cool.
This is how it kind of comes on at the moment. So I'm thinking like when it gets to about here, I want my base to start, and I'm going to get everything to fly in from the bottom. So I'm just going to go up from the bottom. Let's see. Yeah, I like that. Now, the cool thing that we have here that you've got your copy and paste functions up here. So if I press copy here and then come down to the next element, I can just press paste. So instead of having to go through every single element individually, I can then just paste that in. And I'm going to do exactly the same with these guys.
And Suzanne, I think there's another place that you can hit the paste button, right? If you click on that hamburger setting icon on, right there. Yeah. You can paste it there.
Yeah. Like most things, there are always two ways to do everything. So you can either use it, you've got your little hamburger here where you can tweak everything, or you can do it at the bottom panel here.
Yeah, just a preference thing.
It is all just down to preferences. I'm going to delay I think that looks kind of nice. So right now I'm just scrubbing through, but I can always come down here and just press the play button and I can watch it play in real time. Guys, what do we think about that delay on the text?
Oh, it looks cool.
Like
I will say,
not?
no, that looks good. I think in terms of just one note on when you're hitting play and the playing back in real time, right now the UI is open. The user interface of Composer is open. So just to keep in mind, if you see, the performance of the rendering, not quite quote unquote real time. It's going to be significantly better when you're rendering these out of Studio because you don't have all the overhead of the composition itself. So that's why there's a lot of back and forth, as you'll see later in this demo, back and forth between Studio and Composer. So back and forth to make sure that things are playing. So don't be alarmed if you have, you know, not perfect playback in the editing tool, Composer.
So the last thing I'm going to do before I hand it back over to the guys is adding an update animation. Now, everyone saw that when we update text here, it flips. So I need to add something very similar to our new image. So in this update tab, I'm going to press active, and I'm going to get it to scale in, and I'm going to do Steven's favorite combination of eases and everything else. So as you mentioning eases, we have a selection of your, probably the one that I would say probably the most common used eases here, ranging from nice and soft to a little bit sharper, and then, you know, going down to the more bizarre, like bounce, which I always say is the one that you discover when you first open ClipArt. So I'm gonna put it back to this.
So, yeah, just a note on those velocity curves. So we don't have explicit control over X, Y, and Z for some of you more advanced users. That just means you cannot manipulate the velocity curve of a widget independently on its X, Y, or Z. These are preset velocity curves that you select from. There's quite a few in that list. You know, power of 3 is a sort of a go-to one I use quite a bit. There's bounce, there's back in there where it will come up and then slightly come down. So hopefully most of the people viewing this will know what velocity curves are if you're familiar with other animation tools. So ours are pre-baked. You cannot manipulate that curve. There's just a selection of, there's quite a few, like I said. You can do quite a bit with what's in there.
Okay, guys, I think I have finished with the composition for now. So I'm gonna hand it back over to you guys. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Is everyone ready?
Yes, and now I will go back over to mine. Thank you very much. There we go. We're back. You guys can see my screen now, right? Okay, so the first thing we can do here is when this...
We're in studio, by the way, Stephen, just to remind everyone, we jumped over to...
Yes, thank you. Yeah, now we're back in the studio. Let's go back over to the dashboard real quick. Suzanne still has the composition open here. And Suzanne, I'll have you just go ahead and close that, and we'll actually see that. And then the icon disappears immediately. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to do a couple back and forths between the composition and the app. So let's go over to the app, this guy, which is open right here. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hit refresh composition. What happens is when I hit this refresh button, it gives me a warning. Are you sure you want to refresh? Yes, I do. And now the changes will be reflected when I bring in this lower third. So here it is. It should be.
No, she duplicated at the beginning.
Thank you.
Brand new one.
Operator error. Let's take that one out. We'll go to plus and we'll see the new one listed right here. And now if I hit it here, you're going to see it in preview. And when I take it, you'll see it in program. And now you see a new control node showed up down here. So the image, if I click on it, it's going to take me to the image browser. Now there's the directory. It defaults to the directory where the control application lives. Now there are no images in here, so I can upload an image. So I'm going to go to new, upload. And on the desktop, I have a Twitter logo, which I downloaded from the web. I did a search on the Twitter logo, downloaded it to my desktop, scaled it down, I think in Photoshop, and then it shows up. Now I can select this guy, and there it is. It shows up in preview. And for it to show up in program, I took it in, took it out, or I could have hit the update button. The other way to put in an image here, so just a couple words on this image browser. So what happens is you can drag and drop images into here. So for example, if I come back over to the dashboard, I can just minimize my screen here. I could have taken this image and simply dragged and dropped it in here, and it's going to upload it. Now I have it in there twice. I can right click, remove it. And what's going on here is, where are these images going? Some users ask, where is that image going? Well, it's going into your account, and more specifically, it's going into its own dedicated bucket on AWS. We do all of our storage on Amazon. So I'm going to expand this out, come back over to Studio, and I can also import, like I showed you here, I can import from within Studio. So I went here. Previously, I didn't have an image, and I can just upload it with the upload button. And you can see if I if I just cut this and update, you're going to see the update animation. There is no path. So if I pop it back in and hit update, you'll see Suzanne's animation, the update animation that she put in there. So I'm going to jump back over to the dashboard, and I'm going to open up the composition one more time. And what I'm going to do immediately, just like Suzanne did, is I'm going to call this new version. And I'm going to go back, restore back to the original one to remove everything that Suzanne did. And you'll see it reflect in the composition tree. You don't see her new. Go back over to the Composer. I'm sorry, to Studio, refresh. And it gives you this dialog box that says, well, wait a minute, it's confused, right? It doesn't know that that graphic that I had in the list, this new one, is no longer there. And the reason I'm doing this is to show you the relationship between Studio and Composer. Obviously, the one that Suzanne made is no longer here. So let's go right back again. Here's the original one. Right back over to the composition, back to revisions, and restore to the new version. That's a very powerful feature in Singular. So you have that ability to go back and forth between older versions. Maybe you mess up and you say, listen, I didn't like what the changes I made. Here's the new one that Suzanne made. Back over to the Control app, hit refresh, and you'll see the changes reflected. It will, the new graphic, or the new overlay will be listed in the list. And one more thing, this button right here, select composition. This one is in here for a variety of reasons, but if you select a composition, the composition from here, you will lose all of the things in your list. So for the purposes of this demo, we're just refreshing. We're going back and forth between Composer and Studio and refreshing. Travis, did I see a message from you that we might have a, I will remind anyone watching that we do have a, on our YouTube channel, please put in any questions that you might have. And at the end of this, as we wrap up, we'll take a few questions on what we've done here today. I think that pretty much covers it. Oh, you know, one more thing I'll show you too, the order in which these show up. I had a user ask me about this recently. So if I go back into Suzanne's composition that she edited, you can click and drag and change the order of these. So you can put things in some sort of a logical order, maybe image first, then header text. One other of note is whatever is left in these fields in Composer, that is what's going to get imported into Studio. So if you clear these out, for example, including the image path, so now there is no image path, I'll go back over to clear, I'm going to refresh, back over to Studio. And the next time I bring in the new overlay called new, you'll see there's nothing visible. All the fields are blank. Does that make sense? I hope.
And Stephen, why did you add in a new lower third as opposed to just showing us the previous one?
Well, I didn't have to. Probably.
Well, no, I guess what I was trying to say there is that when you type stuff into Studio, it's gonna save out everything that you've prepared in that overlay. So it's not gonna just completely delete it. But because he added a new one after the update occurred in Composer, it grabs the default information from Composer before you've added in the stuff that you want in Studio, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And you know, that's a good point, Catherine. And I'd say too, Number of users get a little confused with the relationship between this jumping back and forth between a composition and a control application. What we're effectively doing here is really, for an operator, somebody who's like triggering these graphics and maybe a quite extensive list of graphics, at the end of the day, you really don't want to be dealing with the authoring environment when it comes down to actually producing your show and triggering a long list of graphics. That's really at its highest level why we have those two pieces to our platform. And I will say too, a couple of users have gotten confused. They might go into Composer and start duplicating these compositions, sub-compositions over and over, changing the data here so that when they come into Studio, everything's already built. There are situations that we'll get to in other demos where you might need to do that, but for all intents and purposes, it's not necessary. You basically have one core template and you're changing the data within that template.
It keeps your compositions really light, so you don't have maybe 20 overlays instead of just 10, with each having two different types of data. So
that's a very good point. You know, as you get more advanced in Singular and you're building, like this is a quite a large list. What's the limit? There really technically isn't one. And to Catherine's point, you know, the smaller, the lighter this composition tree, the more you're going to be able to get out of your composition. When I say get out of your composition, more you're going to be able to render, because at the end of the day, all of this stuff has to render in the browser. So, you know, a light, efficient composition makes the most sense. You know, as long as I'm right here, I don't know, Catherine, we probably should touch on these two guys that are sitting up here, these globals.
Yeah, we sort of skated over that. In the last video, I think what we did was we updated the color. And we mentioned this term global, and really what that is a control node that's been created at the root of the composition tree. So we're here at the root, as you can see on the left, with that parent folder called clear. And when you create control nodes here, it's going to allow you to connect these control nodes to every single overlay element beneath it that you want to connect it to. So I don't know if either of you two want to touch more on globals, but
you know, I'm right here. I'll just dive into Suzanne's new one and show you. So for example, I'm going to use the plus key to expand the entire all of the widgets that are contained within this tree of this lower third graphic. I'm going to go to animation. You can see all the various animations and they've been placed. We can sort of scrub through. And what we're talking about here is on this, I believe it's the header base, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so this header base, which is the base color with it's got a gradient on top of it. This one, when we click here to see, you can see it's green. And again, as Catherine mentioned earlier, that denotes that it's connected to a control node. But when you click here, it's not connected to a control node here at this sub-composition level. It's connected to a control node that's at the root level. And at the root level, we have two, primary and secondary color. Again, I'll go up to the root, the top of the composition tree, and you can see there's two here. So this is really handy because if I go ahead and bring up my navigator, and I'm going to bring in just a couple of other graphics that also have elements connected to these two control nodes at the root level. If we start making changes, it's pretty self-apparent what happens. It looks like this one may not be connected. Or maybe it is. There it is. It was this color. I don't know if my colors are the best here. They're kind of all over the map. But you can see that gives you the ability to have control nodes that are global, what we refer to as global control nodes. So what does that look like in Studio? You go back over to the Studio Control app, and you can add a global data. There's already one in here. You can have multiples. So we'll just focus on one. I'm going to delete this first one. And you can see I can change the colors here. And then if I take it, you can see it turned red. And that one turned magenta. Makes sense? I hope. What do you think, guys? Did I miss anything on that?
Can you just go back over to, so we stumbled across this last week. So yeah, if you go back over to the composition for me.
Yep.
And then just press the hamburger by the primary color. So you can see that we've that checkbox that says update immediately. So this means that as soon as it registers any changes, it's going to push that straight away. Because last week I remember, last time we did that, we got we tripped ourselves up because we forgot about this great feature.
Yeah, this is a really cool feature. So basically what Suzanne is talking about here, so when I make a change here, you can see these, I'm not having to hit update because immediate update is enabled on that control node back here, right? So again, here's Composer, immediate update is enabled. I'm not forced to hit the update button every time. And that's a very powerful little feature. It makes it so you have immediate changes on this program output. I will say,
can we,
as long as we,
I was going to say, can we add maybe the immediate update to our sub composition control nodes for the new lower third, just so they can see that it's
certainly. We go in here, and so
I mean, you might not want to do it, but
the header, it's not enabled. If I enable it, hit save, and let's go down to the other ones. Do not. So we'll just the header has immediate update. Go back over to the Studio Control app, refresh. Bring it in preview, take it into program. And now when I make any change that I'm going to make here, I believe I made it here, it automatically starts doing it. You can see right here. Actually, it happens in both preview and program. But these ones require that the text and subtext require me to hit the update button. And you know what? Since we sort of went down this little rabbit hole, which is a good one to go down at this point, because these control nodes, the sort of the 50,000 view of this demo is really to show you how to add functionality to your downloaded themes from the marketplace, and a lot of the time you'll be spending is in these control nodes. There's a few other things here. You see ID and text. Or ID and title. The one you need to be concerned with is title. That's the name that's going to show up inside of Studio. This one is the second one that we have when you're doing more advanced controlling of Singular, when you're perhaps writing your own custom control applications. So just for probably consistency point, make them the same, but this is the one that Studio will read. We showed you immediate update. That's available on all control nodes. And the last one is hide and form. All that means is, let's go back to the top of the composition tree where we had those globals. And let's say, for example, you as an artist, as a designer, do not want to have your operators have access to be able to change the colors of things. When you don't want that. So you can simply hide in form. Same with this one. I'm going to jump back over to Studio, refresh. And now when I hit the global data, you see nothing. It's still there, but there's no ability to change global control nodes. And that's really powerful because you might, as a designer, you might be playing with the colors of all of your overlays from a design perspective, and you want to be able to manipulate them here, but you certainly don't want somebody to do that and change the brand ID of your package, your graphics package.
Yeah, and that's why you wouldn't want to delete it entirely, because it's really just a building tool for yourself.
Yep. Sometimes it's a building tool, like exactly, Catherine. Sometimes a building tool, sometimes it's you want that. Maybe you have, different themed shows or what have you. So I think we covered most of the back and forth. You see me going back and forth between Studio, Composition, and showing you the relationship between the two. And the ability to refresh them here at any time. So Travis, if you're still out there,
I'm still standing here. So a couple questions came in.
Yeah, cool.
I think we went over it, but I think it's you can never go over it too much. Just one more time, show us how to save in Composer.
Okay. We are in the composition. I'm going to bring up the Navigator just to bring everything out for no other reason, just because the Navigator is awesome. I think it's cool. So you just go to revisions. And let me give you an example. I'm just going to delete this upper left, maybe this upper right. And I'm going to save this as test. You can name these whatever you want. Usually I date them or some descriptive name that lets you know the state. And you simply hit enter. And now you have the ability to restore. So if we go restore back to the backup was the one that Suzanne made. that was the default, the place we started before we made any changes. You can simply restore. Again, a little bit of a heavy composition, not massive, but takes a second to redraw. That's dependent on your network speed and other factors. So the one that new version was the one that we were after Catherine had added, I'm sorry, when Suzanne had added the duplicate of the lower third, and you can see it here located. So that is revisions.
Good to know. Good to know. Another question. In the Composition Navigator, what are the logic layers? I noticed it's saying logic layers up there, the whole bunch of drop downs. Can you elaborate on those?
Yes. So if we bring in, I'm on the PC, I'm going to do Control F again to bring up the Navigator. It's a nice floating palette. I'm just going to make it a little smaller here and try to, actually I can put it here if you want. You can see it a little better, maybe over the render window. Okay, let's take a look at these lowers. All of these lowers, bear with me, here we have, actually that doesn't make much sense, then we cover up the overlay. So if I bring these in, I'm going to bring them one in after the other. And if you notice, when I bring one in, the other one automatically goes out. And that's because we created a logic layer. You can make as many of these as you want. So I came up with this, or I didn't, whoever built this on our team that built this theme, made a logic layer called lower. I can make another one called L3, short for lower third. Enter. And now I can assign, say, these two to lower third. And what that does is it deals with the state logic. What that means is you cannot have the overlay in when this overlay is in. Now the lowers are on their own, so you will be able to have it in there at the same time, which you might not want. So it's very basic state logic. So I'll go ahead and send this back to lower, and then the one I made called lower third automatically disappears because it's not being assigned anywhere. I'll make one more note about this. They're all set to auto. This is a really cool feature that we added quite some time ago. So if I bring in this first one, it's set to auto. If I bring in the next one, it comes in. The animation is what's allowing it so that there's no sort of, I'll call it collision between the two. One cleanly goes out before the other one. But what you can do is you can go here and hit custom. I'll just do it with these two. And you can add a delay on the in and out. So if I go to set this to 1 and this one to 1, and now you're going to have a nice delay between them. And you're going to want this sometimes. You can see there's a full second delay. Sometimes your overlays sort of collide with each other and you want to put a little bit of a delay between them. That's what this is for. And you can
you do a negative and show us what that looks like?
You know what? I honestly have never done a negative value.
Can come in handy sometimes.
There's got to be someone out there who's done it.
Well, Suzanne, look at that. I've never done value in that, but certainly you can do that. Actually, that's a good point. The way these are animating, someone on our team, when they animated, they accounted for that overlap in the animation. But yeah, in the negative, you can see how they're hitting each other. So you probably wouldn't want that. You might want a full second or a half second. You can play with this. It's really a nice tool. And we'll go back to auto on these. Yeah, that's a really powerful tool. Again, any of those changes that you would make, come back over to your control app, refresh.
Yeah, this bridge between Composer and Studio is not automatically updating all the time. You have to manually refresh, and I think that's by design, right? Sort of a safety net, so the artist can really narrow in on exactly what they want before the operator can, mess with anything.
You also have the option when you come back to the dashboard, you can take this app and rename this, I don't know, 1. Rename. I'll just call this version 1, and you can duplicate this. That's one of the beauties of in Singular when you've got this completely scalable cloud solution. Now on this one, I've got 2 open now, 2 control apps, just a complete duplicate. That's all it is, 1 and 2. Now, if I go back to they're both looking at the same composition, right? Clear, that's the root composition. You can see that up here in the title. But there's nothing stopping me from going here, restoring. Oop. Sorry, I don't have the composition open anymore. There it is. The zoom window, it sort of covers up. There's one, there's two. I'll go back to the composition. If I restore the original backup, and in one, I refresh it, it tells me you changed some stuff. That's fine. This is the original default package when we very first started the demo. But this one retains still has access to the other ones. Because effectively what's happening under the hood is we are taking the entire composition and importing it into this control app. When I say the entire composition in the state in which at the point in which you import it into the studio. So however this is left, this is the state in which it gets imported into Singular Studio. I hope that didn't
refreshed into it.
Yeah. Travis, anything else out there?
Yeah, we got another question. I guess this is if you're messing around with more than one composition. Can you transfer elements between compositions?
Yes. So I have the composition open here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make back of the dashboard, same directory, clear, new composition, and I'll call this comp 2. And open up a blank composition. There's nothing in here. And I'll go over to clear. I'm going to take this. Let's take the one we were working on, this guy. I'm going to copy it, come back over here, and then I'm going to paste it. And you can see
it is worth mentioning, sorry, before you go on any further, that if you have, like, say, a dual screen, if you have comp 1 open on your main screen and then composition 2 open on a different one, there's something within Google that basically means that you won't be able to copy them that way. They have to be on the same browser tab, like you have them. So you'd have to have comp 1 and comp 2 on that same browser tab.
That's it. Yeah, that's a good point. Also, one other point, as you can see, the colors didn't show up, and that's because when the copy took place, it's just taking the sub-composition. It is not taking, if we go to control nodes, these two, the control nodes at the global level. So if you come here and let's expand this, there's a few gotchas in here, as we know. So if I go to the base, ooh, this is interesting. Where's the base? This one. Let me refresh. I'm going to refresh the browser. And then I'm going to come into the composition, yeah, if you notice, I did a quick refresh. Sometimes if you see some anomalies in the rendering, simply refresh the browser, and that's gonna restore. So you can see here, it's still connected to this yellow color, but I'm not seeing yellow. And if I hit fill, it says it doesn't exist because it didn't actually copy the global control nodes. It only copied the actual subcomposition. So is that the end of the world? No, simply go to this one. I might go here, copy this. So I want to keep the naming convention the same. Here's my new one. I simply go to gradient, paste, done. And it immediately resolved it. You can see how it went white. Again, the other one was secondary color. So you just take this, that way you don't make any typos, copy it, come over here, gradient, paste, done. So it will resolve. It's just missing its globals. Again, we don't copy the global control nodes we only take the subcomposition, what's in the subcomposition. So a few little gotchas, but not horrible. The main piece is all that work that you did in the animation. That still retains. So all the bits and pieces here.
And it's still on your lower logic layer as well. So pretty much everything is repeat.
Yep, here it is. I just did the comp navigator. Still that retains. So all of the properties of the subcomposition still retain or get copied over when you do the full copy between compositions.
Just one extra note on copying between compositions is you've probably downloaded maybe a couple of marketplace themes that you like, but maybe you find some elements in one theme that doesn't exist in another. More often than not, people like to copy elements from one theme into another one. So it's a really useful feature for a beginner artist in Composer, and I recommend it. I think it's very helpful to build.
I will also, yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, you go through our marketplace, you find some different things you like, and you might want to combine them, like you said, Catherine. Take subcomps from different ones. I want to hammer home one more point if you do get into that, and that is to say, at the very beginning, we mentioned that every overlay should live in its own subcomposition. So that's new subcomposition, and it's within here that you would be building. And just one more point on that. If I just put a widget here at the root level, this rectangle, I go back over to the dashboard, and I right-click and open that composition, make a new instance of Studio, you're not going to see that rectangle. So the reason we hammer home this point of, well, you'll see the rectangle, but you won't have control over it. Better put. It doesn't show up here. There's nothing that says rectangle. The Studio, the Control Application Studio, only recognizes, or will be able to control, I should say, subcompositions. So this rectangle is just sort of sitting out there causing you trouble, so to speak. So if I delete it, back over to the new app, refresh, it's gone. So that's why it's really important that if you're going to start building your own, or better yet, mixing and matching maybe subcompositions between marketplace themes, you really want to make sure that you put them in their own subcomposition at the root level. And again, that's where it gives you the ability to assign logic layers, that type of thing.
Can you show us really quickly how to add a new subcomposition? We saw how to add a new widget, but.
So right here, add new subcomposition. I'll just turn this one off just for visibility, and I'll call this new overlay, whatever it may be. And then again, in future tutorials, we'll do a really in-depth dive of starting with a completely blank composition and really getting into building some of the, the nitty-gritty best practices of building compositions and advanced compositions that you might see in a typical sort of high-end broadcast or high-end stream. But yeah, so it's new subcomposition. Mr. Doyle, anything else?
I think that's it. I know I've learned a lot.
There you go.
Cool.
I actually learned. I didn't know about that negative value on the navigator, or I should say the logic layers. It's a cool one.
I could see it being useful for, like, I don't know, some sort of style when you want it to look like it's kicking out another overlay. I don't know. There's got to be
absolutely. I think we covered everything, guys. We kind of chewed up right about an hour, which is where we wanted to go, and covered quite a bit of ground. We are looking forward to, I know, been chatting with Catherine, we have a bunch of different videos we want to do. Some really specific, targeted to certain use cases, everything from tables to Google Sheet integration, which has really taken off. We've added a bunch of new features in the Google Sheet side of things, and charts and standings and whatnot. But that'll be coming soon, I hope. Coming very soon. Travis, anything from you? We're good?
I think we're good. We can sign off. Start this 3-day weekend early if you're here in the US of A.
Suzanne,
Nice.
Suzanne, tell me you're going to celebrate a little 4th of July in the UK. Come on.
You got to blow
Yeah, I'm
something
gonna have
up.
a cup of tea.
You're gonna
It's the
have a
most
cup of
British.
tea?
You have to
I
do the
love it.
most British thing ever.
Awesome. Love it. Well, enjoy the sunshine in the UK. As usual, the four of us will be back again with some new demos coming up, hopefully, and Catherine will keep you informed on the newsletter and social media channels. So thank you for watching. And
Thanks,
that's
guys.
about it for today. Enjoy the long weekend.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Goodbye, guys.